Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming to you guys with a video ranking all 10 Best Picture nominees for this year's Oscars. Alright, so if you've been following the channel for any length of time, you'll notice that the video looks a lot different. Trying out a new setup here. And I was actually trying out a new lens as well, but I didn't quite get it working for this video. So bear with me. Hopefully, over the course of the next few videos, we'll improve and hopefully I'll figure everything out that I'm trying to do here. But yeah, just hopefully trying to get a little bit more of a crisper image. Not that this one is bad at all. But just, so trying to improve a little bit there. So yeah, so in the next few videos, maybe it might look different, might look worse than this, might look better, hopefully better, but that's what it is. So anyways, ranking now the Best Picture nominees. And I do want to just say off the bat, I thought this was actually a pretty disappointing year overall. I think this year and last year very comparable to me, at least. Obviously, this is just my opinion. Because I've seen a lot of people say they really liked a lot of the movies this year. So. That's just me. I've been doing this. This is now the 4th year in a row that I've looked at all the nominees and done a ranking video. And in 2020. I mean, 3 of those movies to me are 5 out of 5 perfect movies, right? Parasite definitely being one of them, the winner in that year in 2020. And then 2021, I had a couple that I thought were really great in that mix. And last year, just not really any that I really, really liked. A couple that I, thought were really quite good, were great. But yeah. So that's kind of the case this year as well. The highest rating of any movie to me on this list is a 4 out of 5. So nothing perfect for me, but anyways, I just want to say that so it doesn't seem like I'm, that I didn't like any of these. I did like some of them, but just not a lot. But anyways, so with all that being said, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts though on some of these nominees, even if you haven't seen them all, of course, just the ones you have seen. Some of the bigger ones like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Top Gun Maverick, Avatar, right? So there's a lot of kind of big ones here, so I know that a lot of people have seen some of those. So yeah, feel free to share your thoughts on whatever one you have seen. And if you enjoy this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel as well. Would really appreciate that. So anyways, with all that being said then, let's jump into my number 10, which I guess would be the worst. No, not that any of these are like really bad movies, right? But anyways, the worst movie out of these nominees. Alright, so at number 10 then is going to be Elvis. And this one I gave a 2.5 out of 5, so lowest rating. And I'll give a rating out of 5 for each of the selections here. Even though some of them will have the same rating. So there's a bit of a differential between all the ratings. But anyways, so Elvis. Start off at number 10. And I watched most of these films actually just over the course of the past few nights, so very recent for a lot of these. And Elvis was one of those. Just a couple nights ago I watched it, so this one just really didn't come together to me. And I was actually even more disappointed in this film because of what I, saw, or I guess the potential of Elvis's story. I mean, what a sad, but also just like fantastic story as well, right? In different ways, his popularity, his kind of surge, and then of course kind of the downfall, right? Towards the end of his life, and even throughout periods of his successful years that have been seen in the movie. So I just felt like a more serious, grounded, kind of emotional story about his life, about that story, would just have been better to me. The crazy amount of editing and just a lot of scenes in this film too, to me at least, just felt like kind of exposition. It was almost like the dialogue within the scene was functioning as a narrator telling the story. And it was just kind of these scenes that were staged in a way to tell you what was going on in his life at this little moment. And then we kind of skip ahead. Like, it didn't really feel like a fully fleshed out film to me. And a lot of these scenes, even the more emotional ones where I think Austin Butler gives a really good performance in them, but even those scenes are just, kind of fit in or kind of squeezed in the middle of all of this huge kind of, again, these kind of like make-believe almost scenes that are, surrounding these more serious emotional scenes, and just makes me hard. It just makes it hard to buy into those scenes, even though Butler's giving a good performance in them. And to me, that's why I don't understand that he's going to win an Oscar for this. I mean, we'll see, of course, but all the talk is that he's going to win for this, and I just don't see it. And I don't think it's his fault, because I think he does a fantastic job. It's just so hard, at least for me, to connect to that character on the level that Austin Butler is at, because of the sequencing of this film, the way that Baz Luhrmann put this together. So also the decision to tell this and make of course Colonel Parker, right, his manager, to tell it from his perspective and make him the narrator is such a weird choice to me, especially through the ending of the film. I mean, he almost is the antagonist, and many times in the film, it is basically pointing to him being the reason, or being at least one of the main reasons for Elvis's downfall. And then towards the end of the film, it's trying to like kind of reframe this in his narration and saying that, the reason that he, ultimately died and, went on this kind of downfall is because if he loved the fans, or, something like that. It wasn't Colonel Parker, but it's from his own perspective. So I don't know. It was a very weird choice for that. I did not like that at all. And Tom Hanks, I don't blame him, because I know that Baz Luhrmann was definitely the one who wanted this kind of performance out of him, but I just do not agree with that at all. So remove Colonel Tom Parker from this movie. Make it a little more grounded and serious, less kind of big and all these kind of wishy-washy scenes surrounding it. And I think you would have had an easy Best Picture frontrunner. The way that this story is, the notoriety of Elvis, I just think this movie could have been so much better than it was. Of course, costumes, makeup, all that stuff was really great. Really great. The editing, I thought, was really impressive as well. But yeah, to me, definitely not my favorite movie that I watched this year, and it's at the bottom of these nominees. All right, so then next at number 9, this one might offend some people. I'm sorry, this is just my opinion, but I'm going to put Top Gun Maverick at number 9, and this one I'm going to give a 3 out of 5, so an even 3 out of 5. So definitely a big step up, I would say, from Elvis to me, this film. And I'm sorry, but to me, outside of the kind of cameras in planes, right, and the kind of behind the scenes, right, of them trying to, doing their own stunts, being in those planes, in those scenes, the lack of VFX, right, visual effects, and CGI, this is just a regular blockbuster movie to me. I understand why it's here because of the significance that it had in the box office and just on the year of movies in general. Like, what an insane impact it had. And if it wasn't for Avatar, I mean, this would have been probably the highest grossing, film outside of any like Marvel superhero genre films. This would have been it. Well, and I guess you could even say Avatar is a genre movie, so even then still, maybe this would be the biggest one. And I can see it. I understand, why it's here and why it has, why it was so popular, right? But yeah, to me, in talking about Oscar movies and this kind of elevated filmmaking, that's the way at least I look at it, I just am not sure, like, that this fits that bill. It really is just a regular blockbuster. To me, a lot of the plot is pretty cliche, especially the ending. I thought was just way out of the possibility of kind of that kind of suspension of disbelief, right? I just thought it was it got a little too crazy at the end there. Yes, it was, really tense at times. There was a really great use of tension in building those kind of the kind of, what did they call it? Where the dog fight, right? Where the planes go. And I thought there was some, that kind of theme of, I did really like the kind of line at the beginning of the film, even when they said, Tom Cruise's character Maverick, they're just all going to be replaced by robots soon, and they're not even going to need pilots in planes. And I thought that was a really interesting thing, but I just am not sure that they really, you elevated, that message throughout the film. I feel like that kind of got a little thrown to the side in exchange for kind of the action and just the rest of the film kind of playing out with those set pieces and the cameras in planes and all that stuff. So yeah, so the story, and this got a screenplay nomination. I think that's kind of insane. Really just speaks to, I guess, the adapted screenplay category wasn't that great. Adapted, right? Yes, yeah, because it's based on the original one, and I haven't seen the original either, so obviously that might go into this too. I'm sure if I saw the original, I do think they did a great job in being able to, if you hadn't seen the first one, really go into this one and understand everything you needed to from the first one that would have an impact on this story. So they did a good job of that. But I think if I had seen the original, maybe I would have more of an attachment to it, like some other people do. But yeah. Overall, I think all the technical stuff, really impressive. The sound, the use of visual effects were really seamless. Obviously not much, but the use of them was good. Obviously the cameras on planes, very impressive stuff. It looked really great, the way it all came out, and yeah. But that's kind of where it leaves me. The technical stuff really impressive, story kind of lacking, and at the end of the day, it's kind of just a regular blockbuster to me. So anyways, that's why it is at number 9 towards the bottom of this list for me. All right, so the next at number 8 is going to be Women Talking. And this one I gave a 3 out of 5 as well, the same as Top Gun. So this is the most recent movie I've seen. I'm not even sure if it's been 24 hours since I've seen the film. So I do think that this is maybe a little low, and I think in a few days' time or a few months even time, thinking back about this one, I think it might go up. But to me, the hardest thing about this film that I struggled with is just buying into it. I just couldn't get past the way that this dialogue and just really the film itself just felt a little forced to me. It felt like we were, having a bunch of women getting in a room to talk, right? As the title says. And it just, I don't know, it just felt I think one of the reasons is because the reason for them, coming into the barn there and starting this talk, we didn't actually see it happen. I guess we saw some flashbacks in that, but maybe that was why I just thought it felt a little forced, because we hadn't seen the story before that all play out, ahead of them actually starting to talk. It was kind of, the flashbacks were kind of just, kind of thread in between these scenes. And yeah, just some of the dialogue, it didn't really seem authentic to me. It really did feel like it, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, this was based off the book. Sarah Polley adapted the book. I think the book is actually called Women Talking as well. So, I don't really necessarily fault Sarah Polley for making some unauthentic dialogue here. But I think the real story is, as well, the colony was in Bolivia. And so to me, like, some of the words and some of the language that these women are using in the movie, it just seems way like over the head of what would actually be spoken here. And the other thing to me was, I really think this movie would have been even better had they gotten a bunch of unknown actors to play these characters, because Claire Foy, you recognize her. Rooney Mara, you recognize, Jessie Buckley, you recognize. Frances McDormand, of course you recognize, right? And to me, that also kind of took me out of it, because it really is supposed to be this kind of authentic look at this period, at this time, and the fact that these, big star actresses, well, not, huge stars, but pretty notable, actresses are in it. I don't know. That to me also just kind of took me out of it a little bit, because to me, I saw Rooney Mara there. I didn't, I guess I didn't really buy into that character, or I guess their characters. Now, having said that, I think Jessie Buckley and Ben Whishaw, especially Ben Whishaw even, are fantastic in this film. I mean, it's just incredible, especially Ben Whishaw in some of the scenes towards the end of the film where he's crying. And yeah, I thought he was amazing. I thought he definitely deserved a nomination. So did Jessie Buckley, I think. But yeah, so I think, some good performances, with what they were given here, in terms of this. And I do think the one big worry I had going into it was, yeah, is it going to just be a play, right? Like, is it just going to be a play put to screen? But I actually don't think it is. I think it really does transcend that. It really is not just them talking in the barn. That is the majority of the film. But there is a lot of other scenes, and the way that Sarah Pauli uses kind of these direction choices, the camera, and some really great like panning shots as well of the colony and that. So I thought it did seem very cinematic actually at the end of the day, which was something I was a little worried about going into it. So yeah, I don't know. Some of the dialogue seemed a little forced. Also, to me, the whole talking and the whole kind of decision that they have to make, which is basically stay and fight in these circumstances or leave the colony. And yeah, so that's kind of the decision that they have to make. And to me, the decision that they arrive at, and that comes about like 2/3 into the movie, and then you still have about half an hour after that. That seems a little long to me, even though the film is only an hour 40 minutes. But it just seemed like that decision was kind of the obvious one, and a lot of the talking here doesn't really, it doesn't really provide any arguments for, or any strong arguments for the other decisions. So to me, a lot of the discussion and the whole talking seemed a little superfluous, a little bit to me at times. So anyways, those are kind of just my, more recent thoughts on this film. Like I said, if I think about it a little more, maybe it might go up. And of course, emotional themes at the center of this film. I don't want to go without mentioning that. It is a very emotional, kind of hard-hitting film, especially some of the flashback scenes. Just devastating, right, to see. And so, obviously that kind of elevates it and brings it up to that. But again, I just had trouble buying into the dialogue and these scenes of them talking. And so that didn't land as well. But I could see if you do buy in and you get past some of these things that I've said, I can see why you would just be, devastated pretty much, or just, really all the way into this film, because it is really that emotional and that hard hitting. So anyways, having said all that, it is at number 8 for now. All right, so then next at number 7, we have All Quiet on the Western Front. And this one I gave a 3 out of 5. So same rating as those last couple there at 9 and 8. But yeah, definitely a step up from Women Talking to Me. So this one, I don't know. To me, again, and this is one I watched recently as well. This one's kind of hard for me because, again, I feel like when I look back on it, this might also go up on the list. I did find myself, I wanted to say enjoy watching this film. I didn't, right? It's actually very depressing and it's not an optimistic film at all. That's the point of it. It's an anti-war film. But I don't know. I'm just going to say it. I did enjoy kind of the experience, I guess, of watching this film when it ended. Some of these films, like I mentioned, like Elvis, even during that film, I was like, so this was a big step up from that, but I don't know. I just felt like a lot of the technical elements were really impressive. Some beautiful cinematography shots in this film. I just thought, really impressive stuff. And James Friend is the cinematographer for this film. It looks like he's going to win the Oscar as well, so happy for him. And I have to say, I kind of predicted this or pointed this out in my review of Your Honor, which he did the cinematography, or he was DP for the first 3 episodes of that. And in my review, I'm like, this cinematography is somehow amazing, even though the show itself and the writing wasn't that great. And of course, Edward Berger, the director of this film, directed those episodes as well. So they're obviously a team here. And anyways, all the way back then, I was like, this is amazing stuff. This guy's really talented. I really want to see what he does next. Turns out he does this, and he's probably going to win an Oscar. So I just got to put that out there. I'm gonna add to my ego a little bit on that one, I guess. But anyways, yeah, beautiful cinematography. I thought the score was actually really memorable as well. Not sure that it needs an Oscar, but definitely memorable with kind of the buh, 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 like the kind of really loud, that was bad, but the really loud horns and all that. I thought that was really memorable, really impactful for the film. And yeah, it works as an anti-war film, but to me, I've seen this done before. And I think I've seen it done better. I mean, not a direct comparison. Band of Brothers, a limited series, and not that that's necessarily anti-war, but elements of that series I think are really great at showing the anti-war kind of criticism, or showing it in that kind of lens. The Pacific is like a very anti-war look at that. Again, another miniseries on HBO, which I think is a little bit better than this film as well. So anyways, it just feels like I've seen it before. I've seen it done a little bit better probably in other mediums, TV shows, movies. And yeah, it just, it just kind of seemed like, okay, I've seen this before. There was nothing necessarily unique that made this film stand out, and that was one of the biggest things. About half an hour into it, I'm like, okay, this is good. I'm impressed, but what is the reason for this being made, right? Because it's already an adaptation of a really great film from the 1930s, I believe, right? 1930s. So, what is the reason for this existing? Like, what makes this unique? And I never really found that in the entire runtime of the film. Again, really effective. It's a good anti-war movie, but I don't know that it really, breaks any kind of, breaks through as kind of this unique thing that really needed all this attention and maybe even needs a Best Picture win. It just didn't seem like that to me. But having said that, really impressed by a lot of the technical stuff, and Edward Berger and James Friend, a deadly duo that I have been watching now for a little bit, and I cannot wait for what they do next. I hope that Netflix has kind of, got them, at least Edward Berger at least, attached for some more films, because, yeah, really looking forward to what they have. But anyways, that will do it then for All Quiet on the Western Front at number 7. All right, so then next at number 6, we have Avatar: The Way of Water. And this one I gave a 3 out of 5 as well. So I will admit, I think I went into this film with very high expectations, kind of unrealistic expectations, I think. I'm a pretty big fan of the first film. I did rewatch it like somewhat recently, within the last 2 years or so. And I think it was like a 4.5 out of 5 to me. I think it kind of went down to a 4, just because I forgot kind of how familiar that story is and kind of how cliche it kind of is. But one of the main elements that I really enjoyed about the first film was Sam Worthington's character, this kind of being kind of stuck in this human body, right? That didn't work in some ways, or at least that's the way he viewed it, right? Without the use of his legs, and being able to have that another body and be in this avatar and interact with this species, right? And then, of course, it's kind of that whole journey where at the end he abandons his human body and now kind of transforms into this avatar, and we get that iconic eye-opening scene at the very end of the film, which I think is amazing. But none of that is here now in the second film, and I knew it wouldn't be, but I guess that's what I'm talking about, my expectations. And that was something I really enjoyed and thought was a really key theme in the first one. And to me, now this just doesn't seem as kind of deep, if you will, or as it just doesn't have that kind of human Na'vi connection there anymore of these two species. And even the villain, Stephen Lang, who they bring back from the first one, is also a Na'vi, or is also, an avatar, or whatever you want to say, one of the blue people. And so it's kind of just this Na'vi versus Na'vi. Of course, there's humans in the film, and they're the villains in some instances. But I don't know, I was kind of missing that. And that was kind of a key element to me that's gone in this film, which I was kind of disappointed with. And the story here just doesn't seem as big. The stakes just are not there to me. In the first one, it very much felt like it was a kind of a big threat that was, just a huge stakes, huge threat of the Na'vi being wiped out, and that's kind of what the humans were trying to do. In this, it's a much smaller conflict. I mean, even the final battle in this film is it's like this single thing with this single ship. And, Stephen Lang's character, or I guess it's, he's in the mind, or the character, I guess, has his mind anyways. But it's actually like a very small kind of, condensed story. And the way this plays out, like, yes, it's a huge battle sequence, which is amazing, some awesome action. but it just feels small to me. I don't know. That's just kind of my feeling of it. Of course, visual effects, production design, I mean, everything. That's why it's so high on this list, because I was not a fan of the story. Even the kind of the family dynamic, I didn't really buy into as much either. But the experience I had watching this film, and it was over 3 hours, I have to say, it was it felt at least like one of the fastest runtimes out of all these nominees to me. Sitting in that theater, and it was like, it's over already? Like, I don't know, I was just so glued and so invested and just so immersed in this world, and that's something I can't really say for any other film this year and for years. I mean, what James Cameron's able to do here with all these technical aspects is just spectacular. It's unmatched. So that is the reason why I had to go to 3 out of 5. And to me, the main reason it's above All Quiet, because I think, they're very similar movies in that sense. I don't think they're doing necessarily anything really that different. But the reason it's above is because it's James Cameron's vision here, and I think that deserves some recognition, in that it's this kind of singular, unique vision of this world, and that he has built, that he has come up with, and I just think that's really impressive stuff. Whereas All Quiet, again, is more of just kind of this general anti-war film that we've seen before. And Avatar is, the story and a lot of these characters are ones that we've seen many times before, particularly in this one, as well as the first one. But it's still that unique world and that perspective of James Cameron that comes through. And so there you go. That's why, at least for now, it is at number 6 on this list. All right, so now we're into the top 5. At number 5, we have Triangle of Sadness. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5, so a little bit higher up than Avatar and All Quiet in those films. So this one, to me, again, talking about potential with kind of the Elvis film, this one is another potential one to me, because I thought if this came together all the way and Ruben Östlund really polished this film, to me it felt a little messy, and if he really brought everything together, kind of had a clear message here of what he was trying to get across, this to me would have probably been my number 1, because there are instances in this film of like kind of brilliance, like there's of the messaging, and the comedy is there, a lot of laughs in this one, and that kind of satire as well. And you can see that, especially with kind of the second half of this film, or I guess you call it the third act, where it kind of flips. But and to me, like, if that would have been the movie, is that, okay, the first half's on the boat, the second half of the movie is, what we see. I don't want to spoil too much, but, they're not on the boat anymore. What we see in the second half of the film, to me, and it was like clearly delineated, and we see that shift, I think, again, like that might have been a 5 out of 5 movie to me. But it's the fact that we kind of linger on the boat, and we have that really elongated sequence of kind of the same thing. It's really repetitive, happening over and over and over again. It is funny, yes, but it is kind of just repetitive. And some of the messaging here, again, I thought it kind of is speaking out of both sides of the mouth, in my opinion, at least. Like, some of it is kind of this, criticism of the elite, right? And showing that kind of power dynamic. And to me, this reminded me a lot of like White Lotus, right? That we've seen. There's been a lot, even The Menu this year, which I also saw and quite liked, which I thought actually might have been better than this film overall. But it actually is similar in that, and kind of that criticism of the elite, and showing kind of the ridiculousness of them versus, I guess the common folk, or the people below them, right? But then there's also instances of where he's talking about, communism, Marxism versus capitalism. And then, later on in the second half of the film, in the third act, one of the main characters of that is, promoting capitalism, which it feels like a lot of other parts of the film are not promoting it, and showing us kind of the downsides of it, and why, communism and I guess that kind of more like togetherness sharing of goods and services and all that is better. But then again, like to me in the third act, it really is showing how capitalism makes a lot of sense. So it just is not clear to me what the messaging of the film is. And for that reason, I just have to give it a 3.5, and I have to have it a little bit farther down than, again, what I feel it could be at. And I really like some of the shots. Even the way he films dialogue scenes, I really liked. It's really unique. It's, usually you have kind of these over-the-shoulder shots. One person says something, next person says something, and then we kind of, rotate back and forth to those shots. But in this film, he does this a lot, Ruben Östlund, and this is where a character will say something, but it just stays on their face for the reaction of what this other character is saying back to them. And it doesn't even show the line of dialogue, but it sticks on their face. And that's something I noticed like over and over again in the film, and I really liked that. It was really unique. And I thought there was a couple other choices like that throughout the film that are just like really stand out and really fresh, like really just nice to see. And I feel like it really served the film well. A lot of great like reaction kind of shots came from that, and I feel like we don't get that in a lot of other films in that way. That's, I guess, all my thoughts really, right? It could have been a lot better. There was potential there, but it just seems a little too messy to me. And it is a little long as well. I mean, that third act, I think a lot of people have said it does feel a little long. And the last shot of this film, so confusing. Like, I was watching the last shot, the last few seconds, basically, of the film, and then it ends, and it's, like, directed by Ruben Östlund. I'm like, what? Like, what just happened? So it's very odd, very, very odd, and it actually does take away to me from the ending, which I think is actually pretty good. So anyways, having said all that, polished it up a little better, it would have been a lot higher on this list, but it is what it is, so it's at number 5. All right, so next then at number 4, we have Everything Everywhere All at Once. This one I also gave a 3.5 out of 5. So this film is a bit of a weird one to me, and I'm not even sure that this is the right spot for it. I think it maybe should be higher. It might maybe be a couple of spots lower to me. Again, I watched this one recently as well, which is crazy. I know I've been wanting to watch it for so long, and then, I only watched it recently. But so going into this one, I knew a lot about it. So I knew that this just wasn't really my kind of film, unfortunately. I just, especially in terms of these Best Picture nominees, I just, my thought going into it is, does this really need nominations? Like, having seen a lot of the pictures, the trailer, seeing the kind of ridiculousness, the zaniness, if you will, of the film. And I feel honestly the same way after watching it. I just don't quite understand why this is a Best Picture nominee. I'm not saying even that it's a bad film at all. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying the way that it plays out and having a multiverse and being this kind of genre bendy thing, I don't understand it. I think it's a really quite a good film as well, which I'll get into in a minute. A really good film that has a lot of intrigue. It's a really interesting ride, kind of a crazy experience. But to me, that's kind of where it ends. I don't know. I'm just not sure why this is a Best Picture nominee, but I feel like I'm kind of on an island by myself there because a lot of people, rightfully so, have this at number 1 for Best Picture, and it probably is going to win. So who cares, I guess, what I think at the end of the day. Now, having said all that, just judging the film on its own merits, I think it's really quite good. I think the messages, though, to me, I was just wanting a little more. To me, like, the kind of main message I got out of the film, especially towards the end, is basically, as they say, and that, nothing really matters that much, and we should just kind of treasure the time we have with the people in our lives, kind of be kind to people, connect to people. In this case, Michelle Yeoh's character, her daughter, connect with her and that kind of thing. And to me, like, I don't know, that's pretty universal messaging there. That's not that deep. The other kind of thread that I liked as well in the film that I didn't feel was fully developed was actually kind of an analogy. I think that's the right way to say this, but an analogy for depression and kind of what that feels like in the eyes of Stephanie Hsu's character. And I thought that was actually a really powerful thing, but again, I'm not sure that was completely fleshed out, in the way that I want it to, but I'm sure that is a theme and something I really enjoyed in it. So it definitely has some deeper aspects to it, but I just would have liked to see a little more than just kind of that universal messaging. And of course, yeah, I just wasn't a fan of the multiverse stuff. Not my kind of movie. I'm just not a fan of that. Some of the comedic gags, though, and the bits in this film are hilarious. The raccoon, the raccoony or whatever it is. I was just laughing out loud multiple times at that whole gag, and some of the gags in the throughout the runtime are just really funny. So they really do nail the comedy to me, yeah, it's just a little hard for these emotional moments to really breathe when you have all of this ridiculousness and zaniness happening around these scenes. It actually is kind of like Elvis a little bit, forgive me, but kind of like Elvis in that way of having this kind of over-the-top scenes and situations, and then we kind of, stumped in the middle of that is Kia Kwan's character, Michelle Yeoh, talking about a divorce, and it's actually a very emotional, serious moment, and then again, it's kind of broken up by this ridiculousness, kind of over-the-top scenes. So, except for the ending sequence, or I guess like the climax of the film pretty much, where Kia Kwan is amazing in this, especially that sequence. I mean, his, breaking down crying, and, it's just really impressive. Short round, of course, from Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. Amazing stuff. And I think he does deserve a supporting actor win. Even just for that sequence alone, I think is really great. So, outside of that sequence, I just felt like a lot of the emotional moments I didn't really connect to in the way that I was supposed to. Anyways, those are just kind of my thoughts on it. That's kind of what I got out of it. Again, I think maybe thinking about this more, especially that depression thread, I think if you follow that more and maybe I read more about it, I watch the film again, that is something that I really thought was poignant and kind of insightful of the film, but I just didn't really grasp it fully. But anyways, having said all that, it is then at number 4 on this list. Alright, so next then at number 3, we have The Banshees of Inisherin. This one I also gave a 3.5 out of 5. So same rating here. So this film, to be honest, immediately after watching this film, I wasn't really that big of a fan of it, actually. Especially the ending to me was just a little disappointing. And I feel the same way about this as the film right above this that I'm going to mention as well. And I'll maybe talk about it more in my discussion of that film, actually. But it's just kind of this loose ending, or this ambiguous ending, that I wasn't a huge fan of. And I was really expecting something to bring this all together. So it was a little disappointing to me. But now in hindsight, and I saw this movie months ago. I saw this was, I think, one of the first ones I saw. Maybe actually the first one. I think this was in November or something like that. So months ago that I saw this film. So with this time that I've had since the film, I think it's actually gone up for me. I've kind of gotten over that ending. And I think the first half of this film is funny. I don't think it's laugh out loud funny. But that's kind of charming. It's kind of funny. And the whole, back and forth with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson I thought was really effective. I think Barry Keoghan is kind of funny as well in that first half. And Kerry Condon throughout the entire film I think is amazing. And wow, am I so proud of her from Better Call Saul starting out. I think that was one of her bigger, first big roles, right? And she was great in Better Call Saul. Limited time, but great. And I'm really rooting for her for the Oscar, and I think she deserves it. She's fantastic with the entire film. And so are the other 3 that I mentioned as well. So that's the first half, but then the second half to me is where the movie, basically the reason that it's not in my first two slots, because it gets really dark and it really isn't that funny anymore, to me at least. It gets really kind of dark and goes in a direction where I didn't know it would. I didn't think it would, right, from the first half. And I did like, though, some of that where we kind of get Colin Farrell, and it's kind of this flipping the script of, okay, he's trying to be nice to him, just trying to get back with them, and then it flips, right? And he's like literally just out to get him then at all costs. And so I did really like that, and it feels like kind of that dynamic, was really earned up to that point. And then to see the flip of it made a lot of sense. And so I did really like that. And then I liked the kind of way that he was going at Brendan Gleeson and trying to get to him. And again, that's where I thought the ending would kind of hit it home of saying, okay, let's kind of see what happens out of this. Is Brendan Gleeson going to die? Is Colin Farrell going to die? And I don't know. So I just felt like the message of the entire film could have been a little more clearer there. But one of the messages for sure that I really liked and recognized is the whole thing throughout the film of them, saying and looking at they're basically on this island, right? And looking at the mainland, over the coast or over the water, and how isolated they are, and like how this whole friendship of Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell means so much to them, but it is kind of showing as well that it's so meaningless. Like, this is just so meaningless that they're just on this isolated island and this kind of it's like an extreme small town kind of experience, and that they're kind of just in this their own world, and it really is not. It doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. And so I thought that was kind of a main message that I got out of it, at least, that I thought really landed. And again, thought could have been hammered home a little bit better. Cinematography here I thought was really great. Some really, really great shots in this one, especially at nighttime with the lanterns and all that kind of thing. Thought it was really great. The score, I thought, was one of the best scores. I think it's Carter Burwell. I thought it was one of the best scores of any of these films nominated. I thought it was really great and really went along well with it. So, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts then, I guess. The first half I did like quite a bit better. Second half, I did kind of like where it was going. And then the ending just really, it kind of disappointed me and kind of didn't bring it all together the way I wanted it to. And that's why it's not in my first two slots here. So, having said all of that, it is at number 3. All right, so at number 2 then, our runner-up, if you will, is going to be Tar. And this one I also gave a 3.5 out of 5. So this film, so I do want to talk about this, like I mentioned with Banshees. To me, and this is just kind of a personal thing to me, is I really kind of like films that have more of a tangible through line. And that's something with Banshees. Like I mentioned, I guess that kind of isolation of them on the island and that kind of, seeing themselves in kind of the grand scheme of things, that kind of thing, was one theme. But again, I don't think it was kind of really hammered home. And that's something that I felt in Tar. I liked a lot of the themes, and I really kind of was immersed in this story, in the world of what Todd Field is trying to portray here. And there was a lot of messages kind of throughout the film, but it just, there was nothing that was really, at least in my opinion, that I grasped from the film. There was not a real tangible through line of not even necessarily like, not an exposition and telling us what it is, but just this kind of clear thing where the ending kind of hammers it home, right, of showing this kind of thing. Something like even like Parasite comes to mind. Like, it's a very kind of clear, criticism or kind of look at class, right? And that kind of is threaded through the entire film. And at the end, that's kind of apparent. And that's what I really liked. But like having said that, in Parasite, there's also other themes that are all kind of around that. And in Tar, I just feel like there wasn't one kind of main through line that we're trying to get at here. So anyways, having said all that, that's really my only negative for the film. Some of these scenes to me are so impressive there specifically is this one take scene. At least it appears that way. I'm pretty sure it's a one-take scene where it's a long one. It's at least 10 minutes long, I want to say. And it's just so dynamic with the camera movement. It's in this classroom with Cate Blanchett as Lydia Tarr. I honestly don't understand how she memorized like that many lines. Like, I'm sure that's like nothing, but that was so impressive to me watching that one take. It's like 10 minutes, I want to say, or 15 minutes maybe even. And so dynamic. She's like moving around, walking in front of the classroom, and then we get some of the students and we shift the perspective on them, and she's still talking and still having all this monologue to get out, and she nails it. I mean, she just absolutely nails that scene and all the other scenes in this film. She's just spectacular as Lydia Tarr, this fictional but could be kind of real character. I just think some of those scenes were just fantastic, and that speaks to Todd Field's direction as well. Some of the choices he makes in this film are just brilliant. Even, I guess, the interview at the very beginning of the film, I think it's a little indulgent maybe, but I love that, right? And kind of just marveling in that scene and letting it play out. It really did feel like a real interview that was taking place. And to me, going into the film, I actually kind of did think it was about a real person, that Lydia Tarr actually existed. So in that way, that was pretty effective as well in making this kind of hyper-realist look at, I guess you could say, cancel culture and this kind of thing that Lydia goes through. And yeah, so really impressive with a lot of those elements. Cate Blanchett was a huge standout and really carried the film to me. But yeah, just kind of that lack of that kind of tangible through line of saying, okay, this is kind of what the film is trying to say. There's a lot of things, her trying to always be in control, her being kind of obsessed with the art and kind of the art or the artist, that kind of argument, cancel culture being bad, a good thing. There's a lot of different kind of arguments and things here, and I just feel like Todd Field doesn't necessarily come down on one side of really any of those. So yeah, anyways, that's just kind of my thoughts on Tar there. Again, if it was and I do want to say too, Todd Field, I don't think set out to do that either. And so in that way, I'm not necessarily kind of faulting, Todd Field and saying, oh, well, this was poorly done. That's exactly what Todd Field was trying to do, and he succeeded. But just subjectively speaking, from my point of view, from my opinion, I just am not as big of a fan of that as the other way of making the film. So anyways, those are my thoughts. That is why it is at number 2. All right, so number 1 then is going to be The Fabelmans, and this one I gave a 4 out of 5. So, like I said at the top, even my number 1 movie is only a 4 out of 5. So, yeah, like I said, kind of a disappointing field of nominees, at least for me personally. But this film, I think Steven Spielberg deserves so much credit. Being the director of some of these movies like Jaws, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? You can go on forever. These huge kind of pop culture phenomenons, these genre, movies, and kind of big movies and all this stuff, and kind of escapist films, right? For him now, at this point of his career, to make this film such a personal film and really be vulnerable about telling this side of his personal life, whereas those movies, the whole point of making those movies was kind of escaping, right, from real life and his personal life and directing those films. And to me, this is just so impressive that he was, able to do this, willing to do this, and make this film, and I think it makes for a really good film, his story and the way he tells it here. So I think Gabriel Abel is amazing. He's basically playing Stephen, right? He basically is playing Stephen, although I believe in the film, right, his fictional character has a different name, the family has a different name, and all that. But I think he does a fantastic job. And I want to say, I'm going to spoil a little bit of something here, but I believe it's when they leave Arizona. That's a point that I specifically remember of the film. And this one I saw quite a few months ago as well. But I believe it's like, yeah, right when they leave Arizona, which I think is about halfway through the film. Up until that point, until they leave Arizona, I think this is like basically a perfect film. I really enjoyed the filmmaking, especially when Gabriel LaBelle, like the older version of Steven, comes in and he's making these films with his friends and learning these editing tricks and showing all this stuff. And even the way Spielberg directs some of these, it's kind of meta, right? It's like directing him, like, you know, Gabriel LaBelle as him directing these kind of student films, if you will, or, you know, these kind of early, you know, Super 8 films that he, you know, did with his friends. To me, that's just, it's so charming. For me, it's like so relatable. It's so inspiring in that way. And obviously that's something I'm interested in doing and have you know, dabbled in a little bit. And so to see that, I don't know, to me, that was just so inspiring, so charming, like I said. And even the family dynamics up to that point, I feel like were really great, you know, and the mom and the dad and this kind of debate of science versus art. I think that was a really strong kind of through line throughout the film here, and it's very much the dad represents science, the mom represents art, and that she's a pianist, you know, into music. He's an engineer, so it's kind of those two different worlds, and that's very much kind of Steven's world, and that he was always into the art from his mom, but, you know, it's kind of this divide of, you know, following your passion in the arts or being more kind of, I guess you could say, smart, really, and taking the, you know, probably the proper road, the more successful road, and, you know, getting a regular job, getting an education, and you know, going into kind of a science field or a math field or something like that. So yeah, that theme is very, very present, especially in that first half. Now, I really do like the second half of the film as well, but to me, that's where the kind of cliche, a little bit of trite storytelling came in, especially with the high school, the bullies, and that's just something we've seen before. To me, the rest of the film felt very unique. And very personal to Steven, where even I'm not saying that he didn't experience those things. I'm sure he did. I think those were real experiences, but just the way that he told it in the film, I thought was really cliche. So yeah, not a fan of the kind of the high school kind of drama stuff. The stuff with his girlfriend, you know, the Gabriel LaBelle's or Steven's, whatever. I forget the character's name, but anyways, you know, the stuff with his girlfriend in high school and their kind of relationship and prom and how that all shakes out, I thought was really charming, really kind of cute. And I thought a lot of the comedy kind of landed. I thought it was actually kind of funny. You know, not laugh out loud funny, but it was funny in the parts it needed to be. And so, yeah, I was just really won over by a lot of those charming elements. And I recognize that didn't work for some people. They probably wouldn't like this movie. They'd probably just kind of roll their eyes at those moments. But I don't know. To me, it really worked. I thought Paul Dano was a big part of that. I thought he was great as the dad. Really would have liked to see him get a nomination for this. He's long overdue. To me, kind of a obscure reference here, but in his performance in There Will Be Blood is one of the best performances I've ever seen without an Oscar nomination. So, you know, really would have liked him to get it for this, but unfortunately, Judd Hirsch gets it with a total of about 9 minutes of screen time, and he's good, but, you know, really. But anyways, so yeah, and Michelle Williams I thought is pretty good too. Not amazing to me, but I thought she really nailed the way that Steven wanted to portray his mother in that way. A really kind of unique portrayal, and she really did nail that part of it as well. So, yeah. And the ending, of course, I really like the ending. Probably my favorite shot of any of these nominees is the very end of this film. And I really mean the very end, the very last shot. And to me, I don't know, this really just brought it all together to me. And watching the film, the whole time I'm like enjoying myself. I'm like, hey, this is really great. But this ending was like, wow, I was just kind of in awe of what he does. And I guess I don't want to spoil it too much, but it basically references a scene that happened just before, and it's a very meta thing. He's really kind of winking at the audience and, showing, that he took the advice of John Ford in the previous scene when he meets him. And that's kind of, his way of, like I said, kind of winking at the audience, but also recognizing his entire career and what it's been based off of, and how he was able to have all this success in kind of the way he shoots the horizon at the end of the film. So to me, that moment particularly, which is something you never see in a Spielberg film. He's never kind of done that, where it's this meta kind of wink at the audience. He's never really done that, at least from all of the big escapist films that I've seen him do. And to me, just seeing that and seeing such a personal kind of connection to the audience there with this film, I think just summed up everything that made this film so great. So anyways, that is why it is at number 1 on my list here of the nominees for this year's Oscars. All right, so that'll just about do it then for my ranking here of the 10 Best Picture nominees for this year. Really like to hear your guys' thoughts, as I said off the top, of any of these nominees. If you've seen them all, if you've only seen a few, let me know your thoughts on them. What'd you think of them? How would you rank them? All that kind of stuff. Really like to discuss that with you guys. And definitely stay tuned on the channel. Like I said, hopefully I'll be working on this setup a little more. We'll have to see what I got in store, what I can kind of drum up here. We'll see. But yeah, definitely stay tuned to the channel for some few videos coming up very soon. Succession Season 4 is starting very soon. Really hyped for that, and really hope to be covering the entire season. So anyways, with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll see you then in the next one.